Welcome back to The Explainer. We spend a lot of time on this show taking complex stories, deep data, and heavy research and breaking them down into clear visual presentations. Well, today we are diving into a case study that is, honestly, it's absolutely fascinating. We're cracking open the Office Drama Stories file, specifically the one known as Clip 072. Now, if you're familiar with this one, you know it is a brilliant, almost mind-bending exploration of compensation transparency. We're talking about hidden weights, corporate cover-ups, and the literal quiet theft that can happen inside incredibly complex formulas. We're going to be riding along with an investigative team, Maya, Sofia, and Jordan, as they uncover something massive. And the wild part? This cover-up wasn't hidden in some secret lockdown vault. It was sitting right out in the open. As we go through this, we're going to see exactly how toxic office politics, hidden agendas, and straight-up systemic penalties can be buried in the most mundane, everyday administrative tasks. So let's get right into it.
I want to start with this quote from Maya Carter. She's the strategy lead in our case study, and she just perfectly sets the stage for everything we're about to see. She says, "The dangerous documents never look dangerous first." Think about that for a second. When we picture massive corporate scandals, we usually imagine these dramatic movie villain plots, right? Explosive boardroom arguments, secret midnight meetings, shredded files. But the source material here shows us that the biggest, most existential threats to a corporate culture, they usually arrive very, very quietly. They look administrative, they look small, frankly, they look boring. Now keep in mind, the company in our story had just instituted this brand new policy called a memory charter. It was meant to ensure a record-first, highly transparent culture. So the first big test of this new charter wasn't some loud public confrontation. Nope. It was a deceptively ordinary, seemingly standard document just sitting on a desk before the office had even fully woken up. And as Maya points out so brilliantly, that totally standard, utterly boring appearance, that is exactly what makes it so incredibly dangerous.
And that brings us right to the core mechanism of this entire cover-up. It's called a black box calculation. You've probably encountered one of these without even knowing it. It's essentially a financial model where the underlying calculations, the actual math making the decisions, are completely hidden from the users. Now, when the investigators started asking questions, the finance department in our story did what finance departments often do. They claimed that these locked spreadsheet cells were just standard procedure, totally normal. They stated the cells were locked to protect confidential compensation logic. I mean, it sounds so professional, doesn't it? Very routine. But here is the thing. This is exactly how companies use official procedure as a giant shield. They use this polished, jargon-heavy language to justify a total lack of transparency. And it works, because it makes it incredibly intimidating for a standard everyday employee to ever raise their hand and question the complicated math that is literally deciding their livelihood.
So all of this leads us to the crucial question we have to ask ourselves today. Why? Why did a standard, totally boring bonus spreadsheet threaten an entire corporate culture? I really want you to keep this specific question in the back of your mind as we step into the shoes of our investigative team. Remember, this company had just gone through a massive internal reform. They told everyone they wanted a fresh start, they wanted alignment, they wanted healing, they wanted truth, and yet the very moment a new system was actually put in place to protect that truth, this spreadsheet appeared. Over the next few minutes, we are going to see how unearthing the reality behind this single document turned into an absolute battle. A battle between a small group of people who flat out refused to ignore the facts and a massive corporate machine that was absolutely desperate to maintain its hidden controls. Section 1, Questioning the Fine Print. Let's look at how the unraveling actually started.
The undisputed hero of this initial phase is Sofia Lane. She's a brand new operations coordinator. And because she is new, she is operating strictly under the protection of the company's new memory charter. Basically, she hasn't been around long enough to learn which questions the old corporate culture considers inconvenient. And let me tell you, there is immense, undeniable power in fresh eyes reading the fine print. See, Sofia didn't just blindly accept the locked cells, like all the experienced veteran employees had been trained to do. Instead, she started poking around. She looked at the metadata, she looked at the routing notes on the file, and then she asked a very simple yet incredibly disruptive question. She just asked, can we define who changed it, when it changed, and who approved the change? That's it. But in a culture used to hiding behind complexity, that question is a bomb going off. She absolutely refused to accept that a locked cell was the end of the conversation.
Which brings us to Jordan Price, the IT audit specialist. He sums up the team's mindset perfectly with this line: boring is where people hide expensive things. I absolutely love that phrasing. See, the executives in the finance department, they desperately wanted everyone to just gloss over this document. Why? Because it was administrative. But Jordan and the team, they knew better. They realize that when a corporate system is intentionally made to be incredibly dull and overly complex, well, it's usually because someone is crossing their fingers hoping you'll literally fall asleep before you finish reading it. It's weaponized boredom. And that's exactly why the team decided to look closer. They dove in precisely because everyone else in the building wanted them to look away.
Which takes us to Section 2, Mapping the Audit Trail. Now, Nina Ross, the executive assistant in our story, she brings a crucial piece of wisdom to the table here. She knows that invisible background work always leaves a highly visible foreground record. Just look at the timeline they uncovered. This is fascinating. Days before the spreadsheet change, a room is booked for a private meeting. Hours before, a draft of the document is printed out. Minutes before, the digital document is routed internally. And then, in a matter of mere seconds, the locked field is changed. Boom. You see, people who try to do things quietly in a corporate environment almost always forget one crucial detail: scheduling a call, booking a conference room, or printing a draft. It all leaves a receipt. You can't avoid it. Nina's brilliant insight here allows the team to take this one, supposedly isolated spreadsheet anomaly and place it inside a much larger, totally undeniable pattern of highly planned behavior.
And that meticulous timeline brings us to a dead-on clash between words and data. On one side, we have the official corporate narrative. You know how this goes. The executives, the external consultants, the finance governance team, they are all deploying that classic soft corporate language. They are calling it a harmless error. They are casually blaming it on legacy risk scores. They are solemnly asking everyone to please think about the optics of making a big deal out of this. But juxtaposed right against that polished PR spin, we have Jordan's raw IT logs. And the beauty here is that there's no hacker magic involved. It's just pure chronological sequence, specific user logins, exact timestamps, and unapproved field changes. By pasting these two things side by side, Maya and the team create an environment where the polished executive explanation simply cannot survive in the same room as the raw, unfiltered data.
As Jordan Price states so powerfully during this confrontation, this is not suspicion. This is sequence. Honestly, this right here is an absolute masterclass in how you handle toxic office politics. Because think about it. When you rely on your feelings or your suspicions or just raising your voice, the old corporate culture can dismiss you in a heartbeat. They'll just say you're being emotional or paranoid. But when you rely on server logs, when you bring precise, undeniable sequences, you remove emotion entirely from the equation. Jordan didn't bring his personal interpretations to that meeting. He brought raw data exports. He took a subjective suspicion and forged it into cold, hard, inescapable facts. But, of course, the system fights back. It always does. But the pushback rarely comes as a screaming match in the hallway, right? Instead, it arrives disguised as something much more insidious: career advice. In our story, an executive named Adrian Vale approaches Sofia. He expresses deep concern for her stability. He gently warns her not to turn a minor inconsistency into a full-blown crisis. He reminds her, very seriously, that the company has suffered enough during its recent transition. We have all seen this tactic. Toxic office cultures love to push back with soft, faux-concerned warnings to just stop looking. They try to frame your pursuit of the truth as something that is actively damaging to the team. But as Maya quickly counters in the source material, and this is a mic drop moment, truth is not damage. Hiding it was the damage.
Moving into Section 3, Exposing the Witness Penalty. This is where we see what was actually hiding in the math. Sofia and Jordan finally managed to crack the formula behind the locked cells, and the contrast they find is incredibly stark. On one side of the screen, you have a standard employee's bonus payout calculation, normal math. But on the other side, you have the payout calculation for any employee who is currently attached to an open ethics case. And the formula was actively, mathematically reducing the payouts for that second group. Let me be clear, this wasn't a glitch, this wasn't a rounding error, this was a programmed witness penalty weight. It was a quiet, automated theft occurring deep inside the complex math, literally reaching in and taking money directly out of the pockets of anyone who would dare to speak up or participate in an internal ethics investigation. This was the smoking gun they were looking for. The locked cells were hiding a systemic penalty for accountability. I really want you to think about the immense gravity of this discovery. This wasn't just a case of one rogue manager being unfair to a single employee they didn't like. No, the actual financial infrastructure of the entire company was literally fundamentally designed to financially isolate and punish whistleblowers. It was a mathematical deterrent against doing the right thing, completely buried out of sight under the respectable guise of confidential compensation logic.
Aisha Morgan, an analyst on the team, completely cuts through the thick fog of corporate speak with one brilliant question. She looks around the room and asks, who benefits if this stays classified as a harmless error? Because up until that second, the executives were desperately trying to shift the conversation back to their comfort zone, talking about feelings and optics and business continuity. Aisha's piercing question just stops them dead in their tracks. By simply asking who benefits, she forces everyone in the room to stop pretending this was a computer issue and acknowledge the human intent behind it. Because let's be real, a system glitch doesn't strategically target whistleblowers. People do.
Section 4, Systemic Repair and Transparency. How do you actually fix something this broken?
Maya Carter's stance on the solution is entirely unflinching. She tells them, do not quietly fix what can publicly teach. The executives, naturally, want to handle the whole mess privately. They want to issue a quiet patch, make themselves comfortable, pretend it was an oversight, and just move on. But Maya utterly refuses to play that game. She understands deeply that a private fix leaves all future employees entirely exposed. Because if you just sweep the problem under a new cover page without addressing the root rot, the toxic culture is just going to find a new spreadsheet to hide in tomorrow. Real, lasting repair must be visible. And most importantly, it has to protect the people who weren't even in the room when the fight happened.
To ensure this actually happens, Elise Warren, who is an independent board member in the story, steps in and lays out a rigorous, non-negotiable three-part framework. Step 1. Implement an explainable compensation model. That means no more black boxes, period. If you can't explain the math, you can't use the math. Step 2. Mandate independent testing to constantly verify that the math isn't secretly hiding new penalties. And Step 3. Require employee-level audit statements for all bonus decisions. They are actively taking the painful lesson of this scandal and writing it permanently into the company's process. They are forcing the bonus decisions to leave undeniable, permanent footprints going forward. It's a brilliant strategy to completely dismantle the dark, unexamined corners where the old culture used to operate so freely.
And this brings us to an unavoidable truth about corporate life. True transparency means the logic survives the pressure. Look, executive promises are nice. They sound great in all-hands meetings. But promises do not protect people when budgets get tight or when someone with power decides they want to retaliate. You know what protects people? A record-first culture. By enforcing systems that are entirely transparent and, crucially, auditable by the employees themselves, the company is finally replacing a fragile system of blind trust with a robust system of verifiable truth.
Which brings us to our final section. Section 5, the lesson of the locked cell.
If you take away just one single thing from this entire explainer today, please let it be this. A formula is fair only when the people affected by it can actually understand what happened. We have to stop confusing complexity with fairness. Just because a finance department uses highly complicated math, fancy jargon, and locked cells, that doesn't mean they are automatically acting equitably. It often means the exact opposite. True corporate equity requires systems that are fully transparent, open to questioning, and totally understandable by the very people whose real-world livelihoods depend on them.
Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on. Do you truly understand your own bonus formula? And if you started looking, what kind of footprints is your office culture leaving behind in the digital audit trails? The next time you are handed a document at work that looks just a little too boring to read, or a mathematical formula that is allegedly too complex for you to question, I want you to remember Sofia, Maya, and Jordan. Have the courage to ask the inconvenient questions. Follow the sequence of events. Because, as we've learned today, the dangerous documents, they never look dangerous first. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer today, and I will see you next time.